Joining us live this morning for further analysis of this breaking news alert, political analyst Rich Rubino. Rich, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now.
Good morning. You're welcome.
So a chaotic situation unfolding at that campaign rally. If you can break down what we just watched together. Also, I would love to hear your thoughts as you watch that unfold yourself.
Yes, well, he was in Butler, Pennsylvania, and he was at a rally. And if you listen to him, he had just basically endorsed the Senate candidate, Mr. McCormick. And then all of a sudden, you just heard shots ringing. You saw the president go down like this. I think a lot of people probably thought it was fireworks. It really is reminiscent of the Kennedy assassination because there were so many kind of eyewitnesses there that saw this. There is some precedent for this, by the way. Theodore Roosevelt back in 1912, when he was actually running, interestingly, the same scenario as Trump was, running as a former president, running to recapture the office. He was shot in Milwaukee right before a speech and actually delivered the speech. It was supposed to be about 90 minutes. He delivered about a 45-minute address after being shot and said something to the effect of, "You'll never get let down a bull moose," because that was the name of his political party. George Wallace, this happened to in 1972 in a shopping mall in Maryland, but obviously very scary.
Rich, one of the many things I appreciate when I speak with you is the historical aspect that you give with these tragic situations. And with how you put that, unfortunately, this is not the first time in our history that we've seen assassinations, even assassination attempts. But knowing that we are actually going back in time and seeing those actions play out now in 2024 at campaign rallies today, what does that say about American democracy?
Well, I guess one thing it does say, and I guess this is a positive thing, is there has not been an actual assassination where the president died since John F. Kennedy in 1963. Prior to that, you had President McKinley being assassinated, President Garfield being assassinated, President Lincoln obviously being assassinated. We're in a scenario now where we really haven't had one. Actually, Ronald Reagan, there was an assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan back in 1981. There were actually two attempts on President Gerald Ford, including members of the Manson family. Squeaky Fromm was one of them. There was an incident where he was in California and he had just visited Jerry Brown, the governor of California, and somebody tried to assassinate him. The Secret Service basically and a passerby kind of saved his life. But we really have not had this scenario where a president actually was assassinated going back to 1963.
Rich, a lot of unanswered questions this morning.
Yep.
As we know, this is an active investigation. I want to ask you, with your political expertise, you're also a historian. Looking at the response from Secret Service at the beginning, it looks like they were confused themselves, wondering how this even happened, how someone was able to get this close to the former president.
Yes, and that's certainly, I mean, it is an absolute Byzantine. It's really a maze to try to get to the president. If you think about it, just for the convention, for example, in Milwaukee, think about the fact that the members of the media have been screened for months to make sure that there's nothing in their record to see if they can actually go to the convention. There really is a lot of work that goes down, that goes through this. When the president, you see him on television, the president goes speaking someplace, and you just think that there's not much to it, but there's so much to it in terms of the Secret Service and what they do to try to protect the president. And then once in a while, you do have instances like with President Reagan, for example, in 1981, where the Secret Service literally had to save the president's life. But this is obviously unprecedented for younger people who have really not grown up in the assassination culture. You go back to the 60s, for example, you had John F. Kennedy being assassinated in 1963. You had Malcolm X being assassinated. You had Martin Luther King Jr. being assassinated, and you had Robert F. Kennedy be assassinated, and it became almost too normal for these assassination attempts. Clearly, this new generation has not experienced them in the media as much.
Rich, you mentioned Milwaukee and the Republican National Convention. I think they heard you, because just as you mentioned that, my producer Julianne found a shot. We're getting an inside look now inside where that Republican National Convention will take place. As you can imagine, a lot of changes will have to be made when it comes to safety and security. We're also learning that former President Trump is not letting this assassination attempt get to him, as far as still continuing with his campaign. He says he will be there. He will speak. I want to ask you, what does that say about former President Trump, as this race to the White House is obviously getting very heated with what we saw yesterday?
Yes, and there was actually a phone call between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, which I think would have been absolutely unheard of a
Mhm.
week ago, where the president's actually expressed sympathy. But I think that he will get a rousing standing ovation when he appears, in part because there will be a lot of sympathy for him, certainly. We saw this with George Wallace back in 1972. Actually, the day after he was shot and permanently paralyzed, he won Maryland with 39% of the vote, the state that he was campaigning. So there'll be a lot of that. I think there'll be a lot of kind of martyrdom, if you will, of Donald Trump. I think that he'll be really viewed as a tribune of kind of taking on the establishment. And I think that my guess is in this address, he'll make some sort of reference to it, but it's very similar to, I think, what Theodore Roosevelt did in terms of just kind of continuing on. In Theodore Roosevelt's case, by the way, he ended up losing the election, but he came in second place. In Theodore Roosevelt's case, he had been president for 7.5 years prior to that. He came and tried to run what would be a third term, because he had served part of William McKinley's term, but he tried to come back and serve a third term. And obviously, he ended up being shot, but he did continue the campaign. At the time, President Taft had sent a letter of sympathy. A lot of the Republicans who had opposed him sent him letters of sympathy, and there was, at least for a very small moment in time, there was some unification or reconciliation of the very divided fissures of the body politic in the U.S.
Rich, as you were talking, they actually zoomed in on the coordinators, as you can imagine, meetings upon meetings. I'm sure they had plenty of meetings before what happened yesterday,
Yeah.
but after what happened yesterday, probably several more, right? I want to ask you, when it comes to security and safety at these events, I'm sure a lot of people are on edge as we look ahead to Monday, when the RNC will kick off.
Yep.
Do you think this was an attempt? And obviously, we can't read minds, right? This is an open investigation, but many people were excited about this event. Many people were excited about seeing the former president, their Republican comrades, and then knowing that this event happened, I'm sure for some it's going to sway them from getting out there. And I want to ask you what ramifications that could have on voter commitment this election season.
I haven't heard any actual delegates saying that they're not necessarily going to attend because they're afraid of their own safety. If they were, there'll be alternative delegates that would certainly take over. I think that this is going to be a pro forma nomination of Donald Trump as president. Right now, he's technically the nominee presumptive. He'll be the nominee he should be the nominee by this week, and he would give a rousing ovation. And I think that he will definitely reference that whole attitude that he has of fight, 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 going like that. And I think that will be that will be kind of his that will be the message that he'll be trying to send. You might see a little bit different message in terms of what he usually talks about when he talks about economic policy, when he talks about trade, for example, when he talks about tariffs. He's going to try to probably add some stuff in about the assassination attempt.
So glad you mentioned that, Rich. Getting back to the tragedy that happened yesterday, putting that video back on the screen for the viewers. You mentioned Trump putting his fist up and shouting,
Yes.
fight, fight, fight. Out of all the things that could have been said during this chaotic moment, it showed the former president is not going to give up, and he won't give up easily. If someone can shoot at the former president and he still gets back up again, what does that say about him as a fighter in this race? We've all seen the posts across social media platforms,
Yep.
people calling him a true American hero after what happened yesterday.
And this is again 1912, Theodore Roosevelt, the exact same thing when Theodore Roosevelt gave the speech. And you can actually see it was his eyeglasses in part that actually saved his life. This became kind of a rallying cry, if you will, for his campaign. I think in the case of Donald Trump, it's very similar to that. The other thing that's very interesting about this is you actually did see a moment of unity in what's probably the most divisive campaign probably since the Civil War. You did see that very small moment of unity. You wonder if Donald Trump will capitalize on that in his speech, or will he issue a public thank you to Joe Biden, or say something to the effect of that it's time for America to come together? That would be my guess is it would probably be a missed opportunity, but we'll see what he does.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things, regardless of party lines, yesterday, that tragic event truly did cross aisles, and it did bring people together for a moment in time. It didn't matter if you were Democrat or Republican or even independent. You saw someone who was a former commander in chief about to get assassinated during a campaign rally. And so that truly puts things into perspective. Rich, always a pleasure speaking with you here on Live Now. Anything else you'd like to add for myself or the viewers? Anything we need to be keeping keeping a close eye on as it relates to this breaking news alert. Also, as we look ahead to Monday with the anticipated Republican National Convention.
Yes, I would just say that. I would say there's going to be a lot more. There's going to be a lot more focus on the convention, and there still is a story here, right? There's still the story about who he will choose, whom he will choose as his Republican nominee, as a Republican vice presidential nominee. You did see in a debate that he kind of called out and starred Tim Scott for what he had done on opportunity zones. Tim Scott, the senator from South Dakota, Doug Burgum, the current governor of North Dakota, who would bring in a lot of money to the campaign, J.D. Vance from the state of Ohio, who kind of shares the somewhat non-interventionist proclivities that Donald Trump has. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. And now this is just going to put more focus on what's going to be one of the most historic Republican conventions really in American history.
Rich, always a pleasure speaking with you here on Live Now. Thank you for joining us for this breaking news alert. You enjoy the rest of your day.
You as well. Thank you.